I thought I was the perfect fiancé, always considerate, always putting her first, always saying yes to whatever she wanted. For 4 years, I bent over backwards to be everything my fiancée Ruby needed me to be. I remembered every anniversary, brought her coffee in bed, and never once raised my voice. I was the anti-toxic boyfriend, the guy who actually gave a damn. But when I overheard what Ruby really thought about me during a phone call with her friends, calling me too soft, and comparing me to her abusive ex-boyfriend, I realized something that shattered my entire worldview. I wasn't her dream man. I was her doormat. So I did something that shocked everyone, including myself. I canceled our wedding 5 months before the big day. And what she discovered the next morning completely destroyed her world. I'm a 29-year-old software developer, or was I guess engaged to Ruby, a 27-year-old HR manager. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for the last 8 months, with a wedding that was supposed to happen in just 5 months. I make around $95,000 a year while she works at a mid-sized company. We had the perfect suburban setup. Nice house, split mortgage, though I paid slightly more at 60-40, 2 cars in the driveway, the whole American dream package. I was always the nice guy. Growing up with a single mom who worked 2 jobs, I learned to take care of myself and others pretty early. My dad walked out when I was 7, which probably explains a lot about why I always tried so hard to be the perfect boyfriend and fiancé. Always afraid of being abandoned. Classic armchair psychology, but probably true. When I met Ruby at a friend's house party, she was fresh out of a relationship with this dude named Caleb, who, from what she told me, treated her like absolute garbage. He cheated on her, made her pay for everything, disappeared for days without explanation, the works. I swore I'd never be like that. I'd be the guy who remembered birthdays, checked in during the day, and actually gave a damn. I was that guy, to a fault. But here's the thing about being too perfect, too accommodating, too willing to sacrifice your own needs. Eventually, the person you're bending over backwards for starts to see you as weak. They start to lose respect for the very qualities that attracted them to you in the first place. And when that happens, when they start comparing you to the toxic ex who treated them like trash and actually missing that drama, that's when you realize you've made a terrible mistake. You've confused being kind with being a pushover. You've mistaken love for self-erasure. And worst of all, you've given someone so much power over your life that they don't even see you as a person anymore. Just a convenience, a safety net, someone who will always be there no matter how badly they treat you. Here's where my story actually starts. And trust me, you're not going to believe what happened next. Let me paint you the full picture of who I was before everything went to hell. Growing up, I was basically raised by a superhero. My mom, Sarah, who worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat after my dad decided family life wasn't for him anymore. She'd leave for her morning shift at the diner at 5 a.m., come home just long enough to make sure I got to school, then head out to her evening job cleaning offices downtown. I learned real quick how to be self-sufficient. By age 10, I was doing my own laundry, making my own meals, and basically running our little household. But more than that, I learned that love meant sacrifice. I watched my mom give up everything, her social life, her hobbies, even her own needs, to make sure I had what I needed. In my young mind, that's what caring about someone looked like. When my dad left, he didn't just abandon us physically. He left this gaping wound in my psyche that whispered the same message over and over. You're not enough. If you were enough, people wouldn't leave. Oh! So I spent my entire life trying to be enough for everyone else, terrified that if I wasn't perfect, if I wasn't constantly giving, they'd walk away too. Fast forward to college, where I actually had my act together. I was in the best shape of my life, had a solid group of friends, played intramural basketball, and wasn't afraid to speak my mind. I dated, sure, but I never lost myself in relationships. I had boundaries, I had standards. Looking back now, I can't even recognize that version of myself. Then I graduated, got my first job as a junior developer, and slowly started falling into this pattern of trying to be the perfect everything. Perfect employee, perfect friend, perfect son. By the time I met Ruby, 3 years later, I was primed to be the perfect boyfriend too. Ruby was magnetic. Still is, honestly. She's got this confidence that fills up a room, this way of making you feel like you're the only person in the world when she's focused on you. She's beautiful. Long dark hair, these expressive brown eyes, and a smile that could convince you to do just about anything. She works in HR, so she's naturally good at reading people, knowing exactly what to say to make them feel special. When we met at Jake's house party, yeah, confusing, I know, 2 Jakes in one friend group. She'd just gotten out of this nightmare relationship with Caleb. And I mean nightmare. This guy was textbook toxic. He'd disappear for days without explanation, show up drunk at her apartment demanding to be let in, make her pay for dates, then flirt with other women right in front of her. He cheated on her multiple times, always with some sob story about how it didn't mean anything or how she wasn't giving him what he needed. The stories she told me about him made my blood boil, how he'd criticize her appearance, then get angry when she tried to improve herself, how he'd promise to change, then do the exact same things a week later. How he made her feel like she was crazy for having basic expectations in a relationship. So when we started dating, I made it my mission to be everything Caleb wasn't. Where he was unreliable, I was consistent. Where he was selfish, I was giving. Where he was emotionally unavailable, I was an open book. I thought I was healing her, showing her what real love looked like. Our first year was incredible. I'd surprise her with her favorite coffee, remember every story she told me about her coworkers, plan thoughtful dates that catered to her interests. She seemed amazed by the basic decency I showed her, which should have been a red flag, honestly. When someone is shocked that you remember their birthday or ask about their day, it says something about what they're used to. We moved in together after 18 months. I was so proud of that house. A 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Well, mostly mine. I handled the down payment, the mortgage applications, all the paperwork. Ruby contributed what she could, but I made significantly more, so I took on the bigger financial burden without thinking twice about it. That's when the patterns really started forming, though I didn't see them at the time. I'd wake up early to make her coffee exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream, served in her favorite mug. I'd ask what she wanted for breakfast, what she wanted to watch on TV, where she wanted to go for dinner. I thought I was being considerate. I thought I was being a good partner. Ruby seemed happy. She'd brag to her friends about how thoughtful I was, how I spoiled her. She'd show off the little gifts I'd bring her, the surprise dinners I'd cook, the way I'd rearrange my schedule to accommodate hers. I felt like I was winning at relationships. But somewhere along the way, "What would you like?" became my default response to everything. "Oh, what do you want to watch? Where should we go? What sounds good for dinner?" I stopped having opinions of my own, or at least stopped expressing them. It was easier to just go along with whatever she wanted than risk conflict or disappointment. I told myself this was what mature relationships look like. Compromise, putting your partner's needs first, being flexible and accommodating. I had no idea I was slowly erasing myself, becoming a supporting character in my own life. The proposal happened 2 years in. I'd been planning it for months, saving up for the exact ring she'd hinted about, arranging the perfect romantic evening at the restaurant where we had our first date. When she said yes, I felt like I'd finally proven myself worthy of being kept. 8 months later, everything would fall apart with a single overheard conversation. The engagement period should have been the happiest time of our relationship, but looking back now, it was when the cracks really started showing. Ruby threw herself into wedding planning with an intensity that honestly surprised me. She had Pinterest boards, spreadsheets, vendor comparison charts, the works. And somehow, despite it being our wedding, I felt more like a checkbook than a groom. Don't get me wrong, I was excited about marrying her. I loved the idea of officially making her my family, of having that security and commitment. But every conversation about the wedding felt like I was being informed of decisions rather than included in making them. "I found the perfect venue," she'd announce, showing me pictures on her phone. "It's a little over budget, but it's so worth it." "How much over?" I'd ask. "Only like 10,000. We can make it work." Only 10,000. Like that was pocket change. But I'd nod and smile because I wanted her to be happy, wanted our day to be perfect. I'd figure out the money somehow. The guest list was another battleground I didn't even realize I was losing. Ruby's side kept growing. Distant cousins, college acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years, co-workers she complained about regularly. Meanwhile, my list got smaller and smaller. "Do we really need to invite your old college roommates?" she'd ask. "I mean, when's the last time you even talked to Phil and Dave?" She had a point. I hadn't seen them much since we'd gotten serious. Between work and spending time with Ruby and keeping up with her social calendar, I'd gradually lost touch with most of my friends. It seemed natural at the time. Priorities change when you're building a life with someone, right? But it wasn't just the wedding planning. Our daily routines had evolved into something that, in hindsight, was pretty one-sided. Every morning started the same way. I'd wake up first, make coffee for both of us, ask what she wanted for breakfast. If she was running late, I'd iron her clothes or pack her lunch. If she was stressed about work, I'd listen to her vent about her boss or difficult coworkers. Meanwhile, my own work stress rarely came up in conversation. When I tried to share something about a challenging project or office politics, Ruby would listen for maybe 30 seconds before redirecting the conversation back to her own day. I told myself she was just more expressive, more social. Some people need to talk through their problems. Others prefer to handle things internally. The social dynamics with her friends were particularly telling, though I was too blind to see it at the time. Ruby had this tight-knit group of girlfriends from college, Ashley, Morgan, and Jess, who got together regularly for drinks, shopping, or just hanging out. I was always welcome to join, but I increasingly felt like an outsider in these gatherings. They'd talk about their relationships, their careers, their families, and I'd try to contribute to the conversation. But Ruby had this habit of editing my contributions. If I shared an opinion about something, she'd jump in with, "What Jake means is," or "Jake doesn't really know much about that." If I told a story, she'd interrupt to correct details or add her own commentary. At first, I thought she was just being helpful, filling in gaps or providing context. But over time, it started feeling like she was embarrassed by me, like my thoughts and experiences weren't quite good enough to stand on their own. The worst part was how her friends would look at me during these interactions. Not with malice exactly, but with this kind of pitying amusement, like they were watching a child try to participate in adult conversation. I'd catch these little glances between them, these barely suppressed smiles, when Ruby would cut me off or dismiss something I'd said. But I kept telling myself this was normal. Ruby was more outgoing, more socially confident. She was helping me navigate her friend group, making sure I fit in. I should be grateful, not resentful. The pattern extended to our home life, too. Ruby would make plans for us without checking my schedule first. "We're having dinner with my parents Sunday," she'd announce. "Ashley's having a housewarming party Saturday night. I signed us up for that couples cooking class you mentioned." Except I'd never mentioned a couples cooking class, but I'd go along with it because that's what I did. I went along with things. My own interests started disappearing gradually. I used to play basketball with guys from work every Thursday night, but Ruby would often have something planned for Thursday evenings. Dinner with her family, a work event she needed a +1 for, or just wanting to spend time together since we'd both been busy. "You play basketball every week," she'd say when I hesitated. "Why can't you skip just this once?" Just this once became just this month, became just, until things calmed down at work became never. I stopped playing basketball. I stopped going to the monthly poker games with my coworkers. I stopped reading the sci-fi novels I used to devour because Ruby thought they were kind of nerdy and preferred when we watched shows together instead. I was becoming smaller, quieter, more accommodating. And the more accommodating I became, the more Ruby seemed to expect it. It was like I'd set a precedent that my needs, my preferences, my time were all negotiable. Hers weren't. The really insidious part was how gradual it all was. There was no single moment where I could point and say, that's when things went wrong. It was death by 1,000 small compromises, each one seeming reasonable in isolation. "Can you pick up my dry cleaning on your way home?" "Do you mind if we watch my show tonight? I had a really hard day. I know you wanted to see that movie, but Morgan really wants to try that new restaurant." Each request was small, reasonable, easy to say yes to. And I wanted to say yes. I wanted to be the supportive partner, the guy who made her life easier and happier. I thought that's what love looked like. But tudo começou a mudar quando... Actually, let me correct that. Everything started to change when I came home early with a migraine 6 weeks ago and overheard a conversation that would shatter everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I had no idea that while I was bending over backwards to be the perfect fiancé, Ruby was on the phone with her friends, laughing about how soft I was, how exhausting it was to be with someone who doesn't have any balls, and how she sometimes missed being with someone like Caleb, someone who knew what he wanted. That conversation changed everything, not just because of what she said, but because of how she said it. The tone of irritation, the casual cruelty, the complete lack of respect for the man she was supposed to marry in 5 months. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And let me tell you exactly what I heard, and how it made me realize I had a choice to make. About 6 weeks ago, I got hit with one of those migraines that feels like someone's driving an ice pick through your skull. I couldn't look at my computer screen without feeling like my head was going to split open, so I told my boss I needed to leave early. It was only 3 p.m., and Ruby usually didn't get home until 6, so I figured I'd surprise her by making dinner before she got back. And when I pulled into our driveway, I noticed her car was already there, which was weird. I thought maybe she wasn't feeling great either. As I walked up to our bedroom to change into something comfortable, I heard her voice coming from inside. She was on speakerphone, and I was about to announce myself when I heard my name. "Jake is just too freaking soft," she was saying, and there was this irritated tone I'd never heard her use about me before. Always asking what I want, always trying to please me. Sometimes I wish he'd just make a decision without checking with me first. It's exhausting being the only one with actual balls in this relationship. I froze outside that door, feeling like someone had just sucker-punched me in the stomach. "At least Caleb knew what he wanted," she continued. "He was an ass, but he wasn't afraid to take charge. Jake's sweet, but God, sometimes I miss being with someone who doesn't need my approval for every little thing." Her friend laughed. "You're terrible. The wedding's in a few months." I know, Ruby said, sighing. "Jake's stable and reliable. He'll make a good husband. I just wish he wasn't such a pushover sometimes." I backed away from the door, feeling like I couldn't breathe. I made it to the garage where I keep my tools and just sat there on my workbench, trying to process what I'd heard. 4 years together, and this is what she really thought of me? Too soft? The same freaking quality she claimed was why she fell for me when we started dating. That night at dinner, I watched her with new eyes. She talked nonstop about her day, complained about her coworkers, and didn't ask me a single question about mine. I realized this was our normal pattern. Me listening, her talking. Me doing, her directing. After dinner, she did what she always does. Babe, clean up while I watch my show, okay? But instead of my usual sure thing, I heard myself say, actually, I've got some code to finish. Why don't we both clean up tomorrow? The look on her face was pure shock, like I'd suddenly started speaking Chinese or something. She didn't argue, though, just gave me this weird look and went to watch her show. That night, lying next to her in bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her about what I heard. Not yet. First, I was going to find out if I really was the pushover she thought I was, or if she'd just gotten too comfortable with me catering to her every whim. The next morning, instead of making her coffee and breakfast like I did every day, I only made enough for myself. When she came downstairs in her work clothes, she actually stopped and stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. "Where's mine?" she asked, not even trying to hide her confusion. "Wasn't sure when you'd be down," I said, continuing to eat my eggs. "Everything's there if you want to make some." She looked at me like I'd just suggested she should build a rocket ship. In 4 years, I don't think she'd made herself breakfast more than a handful of times. "Are you serious right now?" "Completely." I finished my coffee, rinsed the mug, and grabbed my laptop bag. "I'm heading out early today. Got a meeting with the project lead. Probably be late tonight, too. The guys want to grab beers after work. Don't wait up." As I walked out, I caught her reflection in the hall mirror. She looked stunned, mouth literally hanging open. For the first time in our relationship, I felt a rush of power. Not over her, but over myself. The next week was eye-opening as hell. With my new perspective, I started noticing patterns that had been invisible to me before. How she'd text me during work hours with household tasks she could easily handle herself. "Can you pick up my dry cleaning?" "We need milk. Can you stop on your way home?" How she'd make plans for both of us without checking if I had anything scheduled. How my opinions on everything from what to watch to where to vacation were always overruled for her preferences. How she'd roll her eyes at my ideas in front of her friends, then look at them like, "See what I have to deal with?" I started keeping a mental tally of how many times she asked about my day versus how often I asked about hers. In a typical week, I asked her 15 to 20 times. She asked me exactly twice, and both times she interrupted my answer to talk about herself. 10 days after overhearing that conversation, we got invited to a dinner party at her best friend Ashley's house. The same Ashley who'd been on that phone call. I agreed to go, curious to see how Ruby portrayed me in public now that I was paying attention. The evening started exactly as I expected. Ruby immediately jumped into conversation with her friends while I got stuck with their husbands and boyfriends. Throughout dinner, every time I shared an opinion about anything, politics, sports, even a TV show, she would interrupt me. "What Jake means is," or "Jake doesn't really know much about that," or "That's not how it happened, babe." Before, I would have smiled and let it slide. Not tonight. Each time she interrupted, I just stopped talking mid-sentence and took a sip of my drink, letting an awkward silence hang in the air. By the third time, people at the table definitely noticed. Ashley's husband Tyler shot me a look that said, "Finally standing up for yourself, huh?" Ruby started getting flustered when her usual routine wasn't working. On the drive home, she finally broke the silence. "What was that about tonight? You were acting really weird." "Was I?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road. "How so?" "You were being, I don't know, cold, distant. Did I do something to piss you off?" It would have been easy to back down, say I was just tired or stressed about work. Instead, I chose honesty. "I didn't like how you kept cutting me off and contradicting me in front of everyone." "What?" "I don't do that," she said defensively. "You did it at least 5 times tonight. I counted." She laughed, that fake laugh she does when she's uncomfortable. "You're being ridiculous. That's just how conversations go in groups." "No," I said firmly. "That's how you've decided our conversations should go. You speak, I listen. You interrupt, I yield. Not anymore." The rest of the drive passed in silence. When we got home, instead of apologizing to smooth things over like I always did, I just went upstairs to shower. Later, I found her sitting on our bed, scrolling through her phone, but obviously waiting for me. "Are you mad at me?" she asked, her voice unusually small. "I'm not mad. I'm just reassessing some things." "What does that mean?" There was a note of panic in her voice I'd never heard before. "It means I've been thinking about balance in our relationship and how we treat each other." I sat down on the edge of the bed, but not close enough for our shoulders to touch. "When was the last time you asked me what I wanted and actually listened to the answer?" She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us as she searched for an example and came up empty. "That's what I thought," I said quietly. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. I need some space." As I gathered my pillow and started toward the door, she called after me. "Jake, is everything okay with us?" I paused in the doorway. "That depends on what happens next," I said, and closed the door behind me. That night in the guest bed, my mind was racing. Part of me felt guilty for disrupting the status quo, but a stronger part recognized that this discomfort was necessary. like the pain of a workout that makes you stronger. The morning after I slept in the guest room, Ruby was different. When I came downstairs, she was in the kitchen making breakfast for both of us, something she hadn't done in years, maybe ever. "Morning," she said with a nervous smile. "I made your favorite." She slid a plate in front of me. "And coffee, extra strong. How you like it?" I thanked her politely, but maintained my emotional distance. I'd seen this pattern before, a temporary change to smooth things over, only to revert back once the crisis passed. "I have plans today," I announced between bites. "Meeting up with my old lifting buddies from college, hitting the gym, then probably hanging out after." She froze with her coffee mug halfway to her mouth. "Today? But we're supposed to look at wedding venues with my parents. They're driving in from Rochester. We've had this planned for weeks." And actually, she'd planned it and only mentioned it to me in passing a few days ago, but I stayed calm. "You never confirmed that with me, and I made these plans last week." That was a lie. I had texted my old gym buddies, Phil and Dave, at 6 a.m. that morning, but she didn't need to know that. "Can't you reschedule?" she asked, with that tone that always made me cave before. "You know how important this is. My parents are coming all this way." "No," I said simply. "I've been putting these guys off for too long. Your parents are welcome to come another time when we both agreed on the date." The look of confusion on her face was priceless. In 4 years, I had never refused to go along with her family obligations. "Is this because of last night?" she asked, her voice hardening. "Are you trying to punish me?" I put down my fork and looked directly at her. "Not everything is about you, Ruby. I'm just choosing to spend time with friends I've neglected. People who matter to me." I finished breakfast, thanked her for cooking, and went upstairs to get ready. As I was about to leave, she called from the living room. "Will you be home for dinner at least? I can make that pasta you like." "Not sure," I replied, grabbing my gym bag. "Don't wait up." But tudo estava apenas começando. The day with my college buddies was exactly what I needed. Phil, Dave, and I used to live together 4 to 5 times a week back in school. I'd been in the best shape of my life then, but over the years with Ruby, I'd gradually stopped going as much, always too busy with something she wanted to do. After a brutal but satisfying workout that left me sore in all the right places, we hit a sports bar to watch the game. 3 hours of just being one of the guys again, talking, laughing, no one interrupting or dismissing my opinions. When Phil asked how things were going with the fiancé, I surprised myself by opening up. I didn't share everything, but enough for them to understand I was reevaluating. "Finally," Dave said, clapping me on the shoulder. "We've been worried about you, bro. The Jake I knew in college never would have let a chick control his life like that." "Remember when Allison tried to make you skip that championship game for her sister's birthday?" Phil added. "You told her flat out, some things aren't negotiable." I had forgotten about that. How had I changed so much without even noticing? "What happened to that guy?" Dave asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm finding him again." I got home after 10 p.m. to find Ruby waiting up. The house was spotless, and she'd clearly made an effort with her appearance, wearing the dress I'd complimented once, her hair the way I liked it. "How was your day?" she asked, seeming genuinely interested. "Good," I replied, suddenly feeling the weight of everything. "Really good." Forgot how much I missed those guys. "Come sit," she said, patting the spot next to her on the couch. "Tell me about it. I want to hear." For a moment, I was tempted. This was what I'd wanted. Her actual attention and interest, but I recognized it for what it was, a response to me pulling away, not a genuine change. "Maybe tomorrow," I said. "I'm beat. Going to turn in." "Our bed?" she asked hopefully. I shook my head. "Not yet. I still need space to think." Her face fell, but she nodded. As I headed upstairs, she called out, "How long is this going to go on, Jake? This, whatever you're doing?" I paused, but didn't turn around. "As long as it takes." "For what?" "For both of us to figure out if what we have is worth saving." The next 2 weeks brought major changes. I rejoined my old gym, reclaiming 3 evenings a week for myself. The physical exertion cleared my head, and the progress I saw in the mirror was immediate. At 29, I still had the muscle memory from my college days, and with each workout, I could feel myself getting stronger, not just physically, but mentally. At work, I finally accepted the team lead position my boss had been pushing me toward for months. I'd been avoiding it because Ruby didn't like the idea of me working longer hours. The project would mean staying late some nights, but also a potential bump to $115,000 if I delivered. When I told Ruby about it over dinner, she frowned. "So you'll be working late now?" "For how long?" "Probably 3 months, maybe more. It's a big opportunity." "And you didn't think to discuss this with me first?" There was an edge to her voice I recognized, the beginning of a guilt trip that had always worked before. "No," I replied calmly, continuing to eat. "It's my career. I made the decision that's right for me." Her fork clattered against her plate. "That's not how relationships work, Jake. We're supposed to make decisions together, especially with the wedding coming up." I looked up at her, feeling strangely calm despite her obvious anger. "Is that so? Like when you decided to switch departments last year and took that management position with longer hours? Or when you committed us to that $35,000 wedding venue without even showing me the place first? Did you consult me then, or did you just decide? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, recognizing the truth in my words. This isn't about the job, I continued. This is about the fact that I'm no longer asking permission to live my life. That's what's bothering you. That's not fair, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. It's perfectly fair. For years, I've supported every decision you've made, rearranged my life to accommodate your needs, and never complained. Now that I'm doing the same, it's suddenly a problem. She pushed her plate away, appetite apparently gone. You've changed, she said quietly. I don't even recognize you anymore. You're right, I agreed. I have changed. I've remembered who I was before I started shrinking myself to avoid upsetting you. The question is whether you can accept this version of me, or if you only wanted the doormat. The word hung between us. Doormat. A harsh description, but not inaccurate. I had been one, and worse, I had allowed it to happen. 2 more weeks passed. Ruby and I existed in a kind of holding pattern, civil, occasionally even warm with each other, but the engagement hung like a question mark between us. She'd stopped pushing for wedding planning, telling her mother we were reevaluating dates without giving details. I continued my transformation. My body was changing rapidly with the consistent gym schedule. Broader shoulders, tighter waist, the V-shape returning to my torso. Bill commented that I looked more like my college self every week. At work, the team lead position was challenging but rewarding. I was making decisions confidently, delegating effectively, and earning respect from colleagues who had previously seen me as just another coder. I'd also reconnected with other friends I'd neglected, started playing basketball again on Saturdays, and even signed up for a coding competition I'd always wanted to try. My life was becoming full in ways it hadn't been in years. About 5 weeks after I'd first overheard that conversation, I was heading home early after closing a major deal at work. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Ashley's car parked out front. I wasn't in the mood for Ruby's judgmental friend, so I decided to quietly enter through the side door that led directly to my home office. As I approached, I heard laughter coming from the living room. Not wanting to interrupt, I paused in the hallway. You have to see him lately, Ruby was saying, barely keeping it together between bursts of laughter. He's seriously out here pretending he's some alpha now, lifting weights, acting like he has a backbone. It's hilarious, like a chihuahua growling at a pit bull. Ashley threw in, smirking. Right? He struts around like he's suddenly this badass. It's cute, though, like watching a toddler throw punches at air. I mean, sure, the gym's doing him some favors, but come on, we both know this phase won't last. What if it does? Ashley asked with a raised brow. Then I'll just remind him who's really in charge, Ruby replied with a confidence that made my blood run cold. Let him play tough guy all he wants. He'll crawl right back once the ring's on. Guys like him don't walk away from someone like me. He's too used to being handled. I felt a cold fury wash over me, like I'd never experienced before. The past month hadn't changed anything. She still saw me as a joke, someone she could manipulate and control. Even worse, she was planning to let me go through with this charade until after the wedding, when she'd have me legally trapped. I quietly backed away, got in my car, and drove around for an hour to clear my head. When I returned, Ashley was gone. Ruby greeted me with a smile that now seemed so transparently fake. Hey babe, how was your day? Interesting, I replied. Get a lot done while I was gone. Just wedding stuff with Ashley, she said with a dismissive wave. Nothing important. Yeah, it must have been pretty funny planning a wedding. What do you mean? Her smile faltered slightly. Nothing. I'm going to grab a shower. I went upstairs, pulled out my laptop, and started making calls. By the time I came back down 2 hours later, I had a plan. The next morning, I woke up early and went to the kitchen. But instead of making her usual avocado toast, I set a manila folder on her plate. When she came down, she looked at the folder with confusion. What's this? Open it, I said, sipping my coffee. Inside were cancellation confirmations for our venue, catering, photographer, every wedding contract we'd signed, all of them terminated with the deposits forfeited. Her face went pale. What did you do? I canceled our wedding, I said calmly. You what? Her voice rose to a shriek. Without even talking to me? You can't do that? I already did. Why? Because of some stupid fight? Because I interrupted you at dinner? This is insane, Jake. I set down my coffee cup and said nothing, just staring at her with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Her expression shifted from confusion to panic as she realized I knew. Jake, whatever you think you heard, it wasn't what it sounded like. Ashley was just... I simply slid another folder across the table, cutting her off mid-sentence. She opened it with trembling hands, her face draining of color as she saw apartment listings. What is this? She whispered, though she knew exactly what she was looking at. I remained silent, my face expressionless. Jake, talk to me, please. Her voice cracked. You can't just... I pulled a third folder from the counter and placed it in front of her. "What's this now?" she asked, her hands shaking as she opened it. "Lease agreement," I finally said, my voice flat. "I've already paid first and last month's rent. It's yours if you want it. If not, that's your problem. Either way, I want you out of this house in 2 weeks." The folders contained everything: wedding cancellations, apartment options, and a signed lease in her name. I'd spent those 2 hours the night before systematically dismantling our entire future together, and I'd never felt more in control of my life. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "You're kicking me out? You can't do that. We bought this house together." "Check the deed," I said, my voice completely flat. 2 words, no emotion. The truth was, when we'd bought the house, I'd handled all the paperwork. Ruby had contributed what she could to the down payment, but with my higher income and better credit, everything was in my name. She'd never bothered to read the fine print, just trusted me to handle the boring stuff. "Jake, please, can we just talk about this?" Tears were streaming down her face now. "I know I messed up. It was stupid girl talk. It didn't mean anything." I just stared at her, saying nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. She fell to her knees then, actually grabbing my legs. "Please, Jake, I love you. I'll change. I'll do therapy, whatever you want. Don't do this." I removed her hands and stepped back, feeling nothing but a strange, cold clarity. "Jake, say something," she pleaded, mascara running down her cheeks. "Yell at me, scream at me, anything. Just don't shut me out like this." I walked to the door and grabbed my gym bag. "I'm staying at Phil's for a few days," I said, my back to her. "When I come back, I expect to see boxes packed." "Jake, please." She was sobbing now, almost hysterical. "You can't just throw away 4 years without even talking to me. I made a mistake. I'll do anything." I paused at the door, considered saying more, then decided against it. Some things didn't need to be said. I closed the door on her wailing and felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. For the first time in 4 years, I was completely free. The next few days at Phil's place were surreal. I felt like I was waking up from a long, suffocating dream. Phil and Dave were incredible. They didn't ask too many questions, just let me crash on the couch and dragged me to the gym every day. The physical exhaustion helped quiet the chaos in my head. My phone was blowing up constantly. Ruby called and texted dozens of times a day, her messages cycling through anger, bargaining, desperation, and back to anger. Her friends started reaching out too. Ashley, Morgan, even people I barely knew, all trying to convince me I was making a huge mistake. I blocked them all. The only messages I responded to were from work and from Phil, who texted me after the second day, "Proud of you, man. About damn time." Ruby's parents called too. Her dad left a voicemail that was equal parts confused and angry, demanding to know what had happened and why I was throwing away a good woman over some silly argument. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing. On day 3, my boss called to check in. Word had gotten around the office that the wedding was off, and he wanted to make sure I was okay. I told him I was better than okay, and that I was ready to throw myself into the team lead project. He seemed relieved. Apparently, I'd been distracted and underperforming for months without even realizing it. 2 weeks later, I returned from a basketball game to find the house empty except for my furniture. She'd left her key on the counter with a 10-page handwritten letter that I skimmed and then threw in the trash. Some things don't deserve closure. The letter was exactly what you'd expect. A mix of apologies, explanations, promises to change, and subtle attempts to make me feel guilty for abandoning her. She claimed she'd been going through a rough patch, that she'd been scared of commitment, that the things she'd said to Ashley were just her way of dealing with pre-wedding anxiety. None of it mattered. I'd heard her real thoughts twice now. Once when she thought I wasn't listening, and once when she thought I was safely under her control. That was enough. That night, my phone blew up with texts and calls from her, her friends, even her parents. I blocked them all. The only message I responded to was from Phil. "Proud of you, man." The house felt different without her stuff in it. Bigger somehow, cleaner. I walked through the rooms, noticing things I'd forgotten I liked. The way the afternoon light hit the living room, the view from the kitchen window, the quiet. I started making plans. Real plans for myself. I ordered new furniture, stuff I actually liked, not the compromised pieces we'd chosen together. I set up a proper home office in what used to be our guest room. I bought a bigger TV and a gaming console I'd wanted for years but never bought because Ruby thought video games were immature. 3 months later, I was settled into a routine that felt right. The promotion had come through with a raise to $125,000. I'd redone the house with furniture I actually liked. My body was nearly back to my college form. Broader shoulders, defined abs, the confidence that comes with feeling strong in your own skin. I heard through mutual friends that Ruby had moved back in with her parents and was going through a rough patch. Someone mentioned seeing her at a bar with Caleb, leaving in tears after he publicly humiliated her about something. None of it made me happy. I didn't want revenge or for her to suffer. I just wanted her out of my life. The most surprising thing was how little I missed her. I'd expected to feel lonely, to second-guess my decision during quiet moments, but instead I felt relief, like I'd been holding my breath for 4 years and could finally exhale. I missed the idea of her sometimes, the companionship, the shared routines, the security of having someone, but I didn't miss her specifically. I didn't miss walking on eggshells, constantly seeking approval, shrinking myself to fit into her vision of who I should be. For the first time since college, I felt like myself again, and that feeling was worth more than any relationship built on my willingness to disappear. The real test would come later, when she inevitably tried to come back. 6 months after the breakup, I was at a coffee shop working on my laptop when someone approached my table. "Is the seat taken?" I looked up to see a pretty woman with a warm smile holding a cappuccino. "All yours," I replied, moving my bag. "I'm Kate," she said, extending her hand. "Jake," I replied, shaking it. As we started talking, I found myself opening up in a way I hadn't in a long time. She was a graphic designer, loved sci-fi movies, and had a sharp wit that made me laugh. When she asked if I'd like to grab dinner sometime, I felt no hesitation. "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. That interaction made me realize how much I'd changed. 6 months earlier, I would have been analyzing every word, wondering what she wanted to hear, trying to be the perfect version of myself. Now I was just myself. Take it or leave it. Dating Kate has been a revelation. We've been together for about 8 months now, taking things slow. She respects boundaries, communicates like an adult, and doesn't try to change me. Basic stuff that shouldn't feel revolutionary, but somehow does. When she disagrees with me, she says so directly. When she wants something, she asks for it clearly. When I share an opinion, she listens and responds thoughtfully, even if she sees things differently. It's what I thought a healthy relationship looked like before I got lost in the Ruby situation. The house is completely mine now. I bought out Ruby's portion of the equity, which wasn't much considering how little she'd actually contributed, and remodeled the kitchen exactly how I'd always wanted it. Dark granite countertops, professional-grade appliances, an island where I can actually cook without feeling cramped. Work has been incredible. The team lead project was so successful, they made me department lead with a team of 5 under me. My salary jumped to $135,000 with quarterly bonuses. Turns out, when you're not constantly distracted by relationship drama and walking on eggshells at home, you can actually focus on advancing your career. I've reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with during the Ruby years. Phil, Dave, and I work out together 3 times a week now. We've got a standing basketball game every Saturday, and I've joined a recreational league that plays Thursday nights. I'm reading again, actual books, not just whatever Ruby wanted to watch on Netflix. The most important thing I've learned through all this is that self-respect isn't negotiable. The minute you compromise on that, you've already lost. I spent 4 years thinking that love meant sacrifice, that being a good partner meant making myself smaller to make room for someone else's needs and wants. But that's not love. That's codependency. Real love doesn't require you to disappear. It doesn't demand that you silence your own voice to amplify someone else's. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not one person's willingness to be a doormat. I used to think Ruby's controlling behavior was just her being strong or knowing what she wanted. Now I recognize it for what it was. Manipulation. She'd found someone willing to accommodate her every whim, and she took full advantage of it. The scary part is how gradual it was, how each small compromise seemed reasonable in isolation. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. How she'd dismiss my opinions in front of others. How she'd make plans without consulting me. How she never asked about my day but expected me to listen to every detail of hers. How she'd guilt-trip me whenever I tried to maintain any independence. But the biggest red flag was how she talked about me when she thought I wasn't listening. That phone call wasn't a moment of weakness or frustration. It was her true feelings, the ones she'd been hiding behind fake smiles and manipulative behavior. The comparison to Caleb was particularly telling. She missed the drama, the uncertainty, the feeling of having to fight for someone's attention. My stability and kindness weren't qualities she valued. They were conveniences she'd grown bored with. For those asking if I ever heard from Ruby again. Yeah, unfortunately. About 3 months ago, she showed up at my door at 2 a.m., drunk and crying, begging for another chance. She said Caleb had cheated on her. Shocking, I know, and that she'd finally learned her lesson. I called her an Uber and waited with her outside until it arrived. Haven't heard from her since. The encounter confirmed what I'd suspected. She hadn't learned anything. She was just cycling through the same patterns, looking for someone to rescue her from the consequences of her own choices. That used to be my job, not anymore. Kate's taking me to meet her parents next weekend. I'm nervous, but it's a good nervous. The kind that comes from caring about someone's opinion because you respect them, not because you're afraid they'll leave if you're not perfect. That's the difference between love and fear. I spent 4 years living in fear, and I called it love. Now I know better. Meeting Kate's parents went better than I could have imagined. Her dad, a retired engineer, and I spent an hour talking about coding frameworks and project management. Her mom, a high school teacher, grilled me about my intentions with her daughter. but in a protective way that felt genuine, not manipulative. I like him, I overheard her mom tell Kate in the kitchen. He looks you in the eye when he talks, and he doesn't try to impress us with fake charm. Fake charm. That hit me hard because I realized that's exactly what I used to do. Perform a version of myself that I thought people wanted to see. With Kate's family, I was just myself, and it was enough. The contrast with Ruby's family couldn't be more stark. Her parents had always treated me like a convenient accessory to their daughter's life. Her dad would grunt acknowledgments when I tried to make conversation. Her mom would talk about wedding plans like I wasn't even in the room, discussing what Ruby wants, without ever asking what I might want. I thought that was normal. I thought my job was to be grateful for being included, to prove my worth through constant accommodation. Now I see it for what it was, a family dynamic that had trained Ruby to expect men to revolve around her needs. Kate and I have been talking about moving in together, but we're taking it slow. She has her own place, her own life, her own friends. She doesn't need me to complete her or validate her existence. She wants me in her life because she enjoys my company, not because she needs someone to manage or control. When we disagree about something, where to go for dinner, what movie to watch, how to spend a weekend, we actually discuss it. Novel concept, right? Sometimes I get my way, sometimes she does. Sometimes we find a compromise that works for both of us. Nobody keeps score. Nobody pouts when they don't get their preference. The physical transformation has been incredible too. I'm in the best shape I've been in since college, maybe better. The gym has become my sanctuary, a place where I can push myself and see tangible results from my effort. Phil jokes that I look like I could be in a fitness magazine, but more importantly, I feel strong. Not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. I've been thinking a lot about the guy I was before Ruby and the guy I became during our relationship. The change wasn't sudden. It was death by 1,000 small compromises. Each time I said, whatever you want, instead of expressing my own preference. Each time I apologized for things that weren't my fault. Each time I rearranged my life to accommodate her schedule without expecting the same consideration in return. I became addicted to keeping the peace, to being the easy partner. I thought that made me a good boyfriend, but it actually made me a weak one. Ruby lost respect for me because I didn't respect myself enough to maintain boundaries. The irony is that by trying so hard to avoid conflict, I created the very dynamic that destroyed our relationship. My constant accommodation didn't make her love me more. It made her see me as weak and boring. She craved the drama and uncertainty she'd had with Caleb, because at least that felt like passion. But here's what I've learned. Healthy relationships aren't built on drama or uncertainty. They're built on mutual respect, honest communication, and two people who are complete individuals choosing to build something together. Not one person disappearing into the other's orbit. The work promotion has opened doors I never expected. I'm being recruited by tech companies offering even better positions. My boss has hinted at a potential VP track if I keep performing at this level. Turns out, when you're not emotionally drained by a toxic relationship, you have a lot more energy to invest in your career. I bought a new car last month, a BMW I'd been wanting for years but never bought because Ruby thought it was too flashy. I'm planning a solo trip to Japan this summer, something I'd always wanted to do but never suggested, because Ruby wasn't interested in weird foreign places. My life is full in ways it never was with Ruby. I have hobbies, friends, goals that have nothing to do with managing someone else's emotions or walking on eggshells to avoid conflict. The most important lesson from all of this? Self-respect isn't negotiable. The minute you compromise on that, you've already lost. I spent 4 years thinking that love meant sacrifice, that being a good partner meant making myself smaller. I was wrong. Love doesn't require you to disappear. It doesn't demand that you silence your voice to amplify someone else's. Real love celebrates who you are, not who you're willing to pretend to be. To anyone reading this who sees themselves in my story, it's not too late to reclaim your life. It's not too late to remember who you were before you started shrinking yourself for someone else's comfort. You deserve better than being someone's second choice, their safety net, their convenient option. You deserve to be chosen, not settled for. And sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away from someone who can't see your worth. Trust me, the view from the other side is incredible.